All right, people are joining in. Hey, folks, thank you so much for joining in today. Feel free to add the city where you are joining in from in the chat. I'll go first. I'm right now here in the pink city of Jaipur, right? I know we have customers across the globe, but this event is strictly for the Indian audience. Okay, so we have Akshay from Pune. Hey, Akshay, thank you so much for joining in. Okay, hey Nisha, good to see Pune. Yes. Oh wow, okay. You're Anshuman from Varanasi. That's nice. Lot of very interesting education-centric publishers are based out of Varanasi. At least that's what we have seen in our customer base, right? It's a very interesting city, right? In fact, some of the largest publishers focusing on government exams, bank PO, etc. like that, are actually based out of Varanasi. And we also have Mansa with us. Hey, Mansa.
Hi, Vivek.
Hi, Mansa. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good too. Thank you so much for joining.
Oh, no.
Really appreciate it. People have already started showing up, and I understand that it's a Tuesday morning.
Yeah.
Generally a busy day. Yeah, we have close to about 100 plus people who have signed up.
I'm going to quickly join back because this is
Sure. No worries. Speak soon. So Prasad, 20 plus years of experience across doing journalism. Is that right?
Yeah.
And
20 plus.
Yeah, that's a lot of time.
Yeah, sure. That's half my life, so that's a lot of time.
That's a lot of time. Yeah, I mean, you've already crossed the 10,000 hour rule 10 years back almost, right?
Yeah.
You truly qualify to be an expert at this thing called as at whatever this is called, journalism, and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, various kinds of newsrooms, many years. But all very good. All I think each experience better than the previous one. So
yeah,
as long as that's going well, newsrooms are something that continue to excite me.
Hi.
Hey Mansa, are you back?
Yeah.
Awesome. I don't think we can see a video right now, but yeah, as soon as we're ready. Perfect. It's 11 a.m. Our panelists are ready. Attendees are also in. Folks, feel free to put in, say hi in the chat to us, the speakers, or just chat around. Right. We already have with us Prasad Sanyal from Hindustan Times and Mansa Mohan from the print. Right. Hi, Ismail. We have somebody from Dubai already. It must be really early there. Right. Thank you so much for making it, Ismail. Really appreciate it. Superb, guys. I'm Vivek Khandelwal, and hello and welcome to iZoto's first digital conference of this year. Right. And the reason why we sort of picked up this specific topic, which is newsroom operations, all about covering events and breaking news, was very simple. As end users, right? our life is extremely simple. Right? We pick up our mobile phones, we swipe right to see what's happening in the world. We see a notification in a notification door, we tap onto it, and we get the latest scores, latest updates from election rallies, latest updates on COVID cases, and so on, right? As users, and we always feel updated, right? At no point in time in the last 3 months have I lost track of a single COVID death in my city, of a single COVID case in my city, right? And it feels amazing, that you are on top of things all the time as an end reader, as an end consumer of news, right? But what's extremely important is to understand what's happening behind the scenes, right? And today's event is precisely about that, right? We have people joining us across digital newsrooms all over India, experts and panelists who have experience, who have combined experience of more than 70 to 80 years in their domains, right? And the intent is very simple. We want to break down, right, how news is produced, published, and distributed, right, in a digital first setup, right? And so much of the news around us is about events and breaking news and breaking updates and so on, right? And we at Isoto are actually fortunate because we have a ringside view of what's happening in the newsroom, right? We of course work with 1,000+ publishers across the globe, right? We enable them to engage with their audience. We enable them to reach their audience when it matters the most, which is when they're breaking news, right? That's like a quick overview of what we do. Pravya, if you have the slide, can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so quick overview. As Isoto, we work with publishers across India, Southeast Asia, Middle East, US, Europe. Our objective remains extremely simple. We want to help them own and engage their audience. Right. Next slide, please, Pravya. Right. Across 1,000 publishers, 20,000 editors, product managers, analysts, ad hoc teams use Isoto on a daily basis to push out over 150 billion notifications every single month, right? That's the scale at which we operate today, right? And now, without further ado, I would sort of want to straight away jump into our first panel, where we have Prasad Sanyal and Mansa Mohan with us. Hi, Prasad.
Hi, Vivek. Hi, everyone. Good morning.
Thanks. So for our audience, Prasad is the Chief Content Officer at HT Digital. Prior to this, Prasad was working with the Z Group, right? Overall, Prasad and I were chatting, right, just before the event. Prasad has over 2 decades of experience. It's funny, right? You stop using the word years, but when you switch to decade as a parameter of measuring experience, right? It means you're truly an expert in this thing called as operating newsrooms, right? Prasad has worked across brands like Times Internet, NDTV, ANI, CNN, IBN, and so on, right? He's an alumnus of IMC. Prasad, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you being here with us.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Right. We also have with us Mansa Mohan, right? Mansa, am I pronouncing it the right way? Is this supposed to be pronounced like this?
Yes, Manasa is correct.
Mansa is correct. Thank you so much. Yes. Mansa is an associate editor with The Print, which is a very unique niche publication at the intersection of politics, governance, and economy. Right. Mansa has again worked over a decade across newsrooms in India. She's worked with Hindustan Times, Indian Express, to name some of the brands. She's also an alumnus of the Asian College of Journalism. Mansa, thank you so much for being here.
Yep.
Okay, so Prasad and Mansa, the objective of the discussion is extremely simple, right? We want to understand what is the editorial team doing when you're covering a live event, when you're breaking news, right? And I want to start with a very simple question, right? Which is, the editorial team decides what is an event, You get to make the call. You get to decide what will trend today on Twitter, LinkedIn, Google News, and so on. Right? A lot of our decisions decide the pulse of the nation, and so on. Right? And it's extremely, it's an overwhelming responsibility, if I may say so. Right? Uh, I want you to talk a bit about what exactly do these teams, or how do these teams decide on what should break and what should not break, right? Or what is worthy of being classified as breaking news and deserves a coverage by you as a newsroom. Prasad, let's start with your take, right? Because you operate in a much more larger setup as well. Yes.
Sure. So I think ubiquitously we use the word news sense in all newsrooms. It's very difficult to put it into quantitative measures, but fundamentally, I think what editors are looking for is, does this piece of news impact your life in any way? And when I say impact your life, it could mean that it could also give you a sense of joy or exhilaration, like somebody scoring a century. Or it could tell you something as mundane as how to file your, today is the last date of filing your taxes. So I think the concept of news breaks in a big digital newsroom is about tracking announcements like this, which may impact people's lives in a big way, or impact the lives of our readers in a big way, or events that our readers would like to know about. And our understanding has been sharpened by data, but innately it remains very much an editor's prerogative to decide whether this qualifies as breaking news or not, or whether you want to treat this piece of information as breaking news or not. So there is a difference between breaking a piece of news first and considering or treating something as breaking news, and therefore covering it in a slightly different way.
Yeah. Awesome. Mansa, you also get to make these calls, I'm sure, as an associate editor, right? Though the category of news you cover is slightly different than what a mainstream newsroom like the ST does, right? What are the frameworks that you guys follow when making such calls?
To sort of go back to what you were saying earlier, that you get to decide what is breaking news and what isn't. Quite frankly, I think the news itself sort of decides for us. If it's big enough and everybody's interested, you would be failing as a journalist by not really putting that information out there and giving your audience what they want to know. That aside, of course, there are grades to news. There are obvious news breaks, and then there are ones that might not be of everybody's interest, and so on and so forth. So in that sense, for the print, it's an interesting space to be in, because like you said, we're a very niche product, and we focus on a lot of politics, policy, governance. That's what we specialize in. But at the same time, news. So if something huge is happening in business or something huge is happening in sports, we would also be there. So in that sense, that is where those decisions come from. The audience that you have, would they be interested in knowing about this particular news break? Doesn't matter whether they're coming to you for a specific kind of news. Certain news breaks like the Olympics, gold win, all of these is news that everybody wants to be a part of. So yeah, it kind of makes its decision on its own.
Okay. Now, both of you have over 30 years of experience across newsrooms and stuff, right? And I'm sure you've seen things break when you are executing live events, right? Prasad, I want to go with you first, so ahead right now. What kind of things can possibly break in a modern digital newsroom setup, even the one which is as sophisticated as the one you have at Extreme Digital? Help us sort of walk us through some of the vulnerabilities or blind spots that even you have built over time.
So, for example, look, I started working before the 9/11 attacks, right? So my first major piece of big breaking news are the 9/11 attacks that I've been on a news desk. Uh, when you have those kind of events today, earlier you would either depend on television coverage from networks, or you would depend on agencies, or you would get around to calling other reporters if they were outside the country or if there was in some other state. Typically, your own reporters would be there, somebody would be in the loop, and you would get onto a phone and talk to people and try and verify that information. Currently, if a news of that magnitude breaks, our biggest worry is getting it wrong because it's breaking on Twitter or it's breaking on social media. Now, how do we verify that? Right? Now, you can run a bunch of checks, you can do all the due diligence, and yet there is that niggling sort of sense at the back of your head to say that I don't want to get this wrong. So I think sometimes we are very, very conservative with how we cover breaking news or how we go about categorizing breaking news. And we've increasingly become so, after having made a few fluffs here and there and learned from our mistakes as we go along, that it's really very, very important to get all your processes right. So in a big newsroom and something as large as HT, which has both print and digital combined, you will have a bunch of processes running through the whole system, and we are therefore sometimes not first, but we want to definitely be accurate. I think we're putting a premium on accuracy and getting it right, rather than just breaking it first and being out there first. And that is the sort of concern that currently sort of envelops the newsroom. In how do we get our processes right? Because everybody's scrambling in that sort of situation. If it's of the magnitude of an accident or a blast or a terror attack, then just scrambling around for information. Information is often coming through in bits and pieces. How do you put the pieces of the puzzle together? At what point do you say that, look, I'm good to break this news? At what point are you good with going in and putting it out there? Because most of the times you don't have all the pieces of the puzzle, even when you're putting it out there. So I think that's the biggest challenge that the newsroom faces, tries to mitigate and continues to work on processes.
So accuracy and exhaustiveness of information continues to be a biggest challenge, even if you're operating in a newsroom as resourceful as the HD Digital one is. Yeah, interesting. Right, Mansa, your experience, I'm sure at print would be slightly different. Is that right? You're on mute. I'm sorry. It's a conventional mistake. Every Zoom speaker always does.
Yeah.
But yes.
In a way, yes, but the essence of it is really the same. You do the same editorial checks, you follow the same rigor when it comes to putting out information. So, I mean, we might be a smaller organization, but we're still holding up the same journalistic standards. So it really is about the news. You want to verify the information as it comes in. You will call the reporter whose beat it is. You will ask them to check with their sources. You are tracking news on the television. You're seeing what's happening on social media. You're trying to verify it as best as you can from the desk, because everybody's getting this information at the same time. So it's the same rigor.
I'm assuming, in the heat of the moment, right, when news is breaking, when events are unfolding, the new information is flowing to you guys, it's not happening in like a structured manner, right? It's not like on a Facebook news feed where you're seeing every single update neatly, cleanly.
And the nightmare, but that's the fun part.
It's the fun part, right? Okay, because I'm assuming information is just being bombarded to you from WhatsApp groups and Slack updates or Twitter, right? Like, what's the fact check process, if at all, that sort of goes in these cases?
If we're looking at TV reports, then we try to see who they're attributing their information to. If we can sort of figure out where they're getting it from, then sort of go to the source ourselves. If we can't, then we always attribute it to the news channel. Depending on the news channel, you take a call on whether you want to follow a particular news channel or not. But attribution is the golden rule. Any information that you're putting out there that you aren't able to verify on your own, you have to attribute it and have to be sure that you are pointing people to a credible source. Similarly, if you are looking at social media, if you're looking at Twitter or Facebook, you are looking at the handles and the accounts that is putting that information out there. So, verified accounts are great. But if it's not a verified account, then you try to see if you can cross-reference that bit of information with, like, look at the volume of accounts putting that information out there. Does it seem credible? You also make the choice to not put out certain bits of information if it doesn't seem like it's coming from a credible source. It might not be wrong or inaccurate, but you want to be sure because your audience is coming to you trusting that the information that you put out there is accurate. So that is part of the game. You're on mute, Vivek.
Okay, so now this, of course, is very relatable when it comes to unplanned events or events which take us completely by surprise, right? I'm talking about things like the COVID second wave, which happened, the massive event of demonetization and so on, right? But news is equally about planned events, right? Events which are visible, events which you have access to way in advance, right? It can be something as simple as the PM making an announcement at 8 p.m. tonight, or something as massive as the Olympics itself, right? What's the operating playbook? Because I'm sure things are completely different when you're dealing with these two kind of things, right? Prasad, like, just if you could just walk us through how the execution looks like.
So for and we've actually borrowed a leaf from our operating playbook, as it were, of planned events and tried pasting it over to big breaking news and unplanned events. I think that most of the HT newsroom, digital newsroom operations are built around having a single point of contact for any news, which means that the information can flow through various teams, but the no-go on a news or putting out a bit of information is decided by that single point of contact. Now, that's normally a senior editor in that vertical, and she or he will decide what's good to go, what's not good to go. If it's not good to go, it goes back into the hopper for another round of verification, at which point somebody can definitively say that it's verified. On planned events, I think the planning happens depending on what kind of time you have. But let's say for elections or for Olympics, you're actually planning about 60 days in advance, typically, because then you're working with your product and tech teams to build out some product features, to see where you can integrate with partners for additional content, see how your content engine will pivot during those days or those hours. So that's a lot of planning that goes into that event. On D-Day, it's up to the edit folks to sort of carry through with the coverage, because then you're not building features. Then you're just, so the product and the tech goes into a maintenance mode to see nothing breaks down, because you're expecting a flurry of traffic on your site and your concurrent users might be really high, etc. But it's up to the content folks to decide on how to pull off the coverage. Usually there is a plan, but you tweak the plan as you go along. You tweak the plan as you go along, because it's typically you go into an event coverage with, it's like playing a game of cricket, perhaps. You go into it with a game plan, but if it's not working for you, you have to make changes as the game goes on. So that's primarily how you sort of work on planned events. But on planned events, I think product tech intervention or product tech collaboration has a very, very vital role to play in how the event is finally executed.
Got it. Okay. So it definitely makes sense to sort of plan way ahead in advance, because if you want to cover the event in a specific fashion, in a specific light and manner, right, this does make sense, right? Manasa, in your case, right, because one, it's a niche setup, right? What's your approach when it comes to covering things like, let's say, the budget, for instance? Yeah.
There's a very clear plan in place, and also because it's an event, you have an idea as to how it's going to unfold. You know, there's going to be a budget speech. You know that these are the big ticket events you're sort of looking forward to. So there is a sense of what to expect. A lot of times we're not, when you think of a planned event, you're not just thinking of one live feed. You're also thinking of a constellation of content to put out along with it. So that's typically you're thinking of like live videos where there's an immediate breakdown. Okay, these are the top 5 things that you want to know about the budget. These are the top 5 things you want to know in terms of what this impacts, how does it impact your tax income, so on and so forth. So there are usually like a few key things that you keep in mind. There is content that is like background for content that is created and kept ready so that the turnaround time is as little as possible. And you're feeding all of this to your main blog, your live feed. You're pushing this out on social media in a way that it's easily discoverable. So it's all about hashtags. It's all about understanding what people are looking for. You're thinking headline, you're thinking SEO. So the plan is important because everyone knows what they're supposed to be doing and there's no repetition of efforts, and you're able to hit all targets as quickly, simultaneously, and effectively as possible. That makes sure you have a clear idea of what you're going into. And at the same time, if something happens that you don't foresee, just be quick about it. Agility is foremost. So, but that in any newsroom is true with any kind of news, whether it's planned, unplanned, you are trying to be as quick and as agile with it as possible. So if you're a good enough newsroom, then it's built in already. Awesome. I think that shows to the audience because they know that they can trust you to come up there and give you information immediately as soon as it happens.
Right, absolutely, yes. Agility is the key there. Okay. Now, help me understand, right? What's happening in the background in terms of collaborating with different speakers? Sorry, with different teams in the background, right? So you have the SEO team who is possibly trying to figure out how do you fix this and so on and so forth. You have the analytics team which is feeding you data in terms of what's working and what's not working. Right? What kind of collaboration happens as some of these events are taking place within the newsroom?
I think within the newsroom, in a setup like HD, your collaboration with the SEO team is very real time on most events. For planned events, of course, you go in with a bunch of suggestions, you go in with a bunch of suggested headlines. You also coordinate very closely with the social media team to understand your hashtags and therefore coordinate on a very real-time basis using Slack or some form of messaging service, MS Teams, whatever. And that's very organic. That's the sort of, should we do this? Some sort of a question which gets answered and therefore it's flipped around. Right? With the analytics team, I think what they do very well is to provide us, when we go into planned events, to provide us with historic context, right? To say that, look, for example, in elections, the analytics team could come up and say, look, out of all your data pages, your constituency level pages did the best last elections, and that accounted for 70% or 80% of your users. Now, or engagement of these kind of pages was very low. Do you want to do this? Do you not want to do this? Do you want to do this at a slightly lower scale? So these are the kind of historic data that they can analyze and provide. And basis that, we sort of tweak our plans, right? And they keep analyzing it. I mean, they're also looking at real time. But typically, an analytics team and if you have a data science and data engineering folks, they are going to work basis learnings that you've had from that event and work towards the next event rather than trying to tweak something during the event, because I think it's really not possible, right? Again, with the product, it's very important that you input the right amount of information to them. And I think the analytics team also works very closely with the product folks to tell them which features work, didn't work, uh, tracking, things that have been built, because some things typically work much better than we expect them to, and some things underperform. It's very seldom that you would get it spot on at the first go, and it's a constant process of evolving the product, where I think the analytics team plays a very, very key role. And that is sort of the larger collaboration. Of course, there's also collaboration with the ad ops team, which the product folks run on a very real-time basis. So if, for example, there is a special kind of ad on a big news coverage day, which is maybe not going right, or throwing up errors, or causing other worries in terms of, let's say, web vitals or what have you, then the product team typically will try and dovetail with the ad ops folks and say, hey, can we do this after 4 hours? Or can we look at this after 4 hours, but we think this is not working? And there also, I think an analytics guy has some role to play in terms of just providing data and the right amount of data to say, is this impacting, not impacting? Should we not?
That's right. Mansa, so now at you specifically, right? Now there is a lot which goes around. So depending upon the format of the event which is being covered, right? There is either like a live blog running, or there's a tweet storm happening, or there's a Facebook Live or a YouTube Live, right? And pretty much everybody is doing this, right? It's not like it's these things are available to just one newsroom specifically, right? As an editorial team, right? What all do you guys do on these platforms specifically to sort of keep the audience engaged, right? Because eventually the war that we are all fighting here is of attention, right? So like what's your one tip for the young editor out there right now who's trying to hook the audience?
I think find a platform that you're most comfortable with and you're able to maximize for yourself. If you are someone who's good at capturing your audience on Twitter, if you're someone who's able to gain that kind of traction on Twitter, then maximize that. And maximize it not just in terms of you're putting content out there, but also use it to move traffic to the other platforms that you also want to build an audience on, and where that there is a different kind of content, different kind of experience that you can give your audience. So find a platform that you work really well with organically, and then use that as a gateway to the other platforms that you're trying to also inhabit. I mean, at the print, we do a lot of YouTube videos. There's a large community there for us. But there's also similarly a very large community on Twitter. And I mean, we have Shekhar Gupta, who's a huge part of it, obviously. So it helps to be able to capitalize on these things and use it as a gateway to push people to other experiences that you want to give them. We also do Facebook Lives, which everyone else does as well, which is it's a different, slightly different ballgame. And then anyway, there's the content that you put out through your website. So your live feed can constantly keep giving saying, okay, if there's this live happening here, click on. Hyperlinking is a great way to do it. It's one of those underrated digital tools, but it's a brilliant thing to have. So you can keep directing traffic from one platform to multiple platforms where you have different kinds of content for different kinds of users. And your audience will grow organically. They will find a platform that works for them, and they will start coming back to you on that platform.
Awesome. Okay. One last question for both of you, and there's something which also came in over email from a couple of people as well. Right. Prasad, what's your mental checklist that you go through as one as an editor and second as a writer? Because you do publish news as well personally. You still write, of course, actively, right? So what's your mental checklist that you sort of go through when you click on the word publish?
So I typically, so our checklist for, let's say, publishing an article, okay, publishing various things, right? Publishing, it differs for forms of content, but
Sure.
standard checklist for me is, have I done the attribution right? Have I cross-checked sources? And typically, unless and until it's an extreme situation where I know that I can go with one single source of information which is credible, I typically look at least trying to get it from three sources of information. So when I'm collating, I collate from three sources, unless and until, of course, you have a reporter on the spot, where you can sort of trust your reporter and go with that, right? And my checklist for publishing a typical article, and in order of preferences: headline, excerpt, photo, caption, first paragraph, keywords.
Perfect. Okay. Mansa, what would you want to change that in that list for you?
I would go with SEO first.
Sure.
SEO headline, but they kind of sort of blend, like the line is kind of blurry over there because your keywords are also the main news words that people are looking for. So the first thing I would think about is, what headline would I look for and click on? What is it that I would be looking for if I was not in the newsroom? That's the first thing I would think about. And then, of course, if it's a story, then that your first paragraph has the 5 W's and the H. What is this news? Is it news you can use? Are you able to attribute it correctly? Have you got all those points in place? So yeah, that would be the tweak I would make to what Prasad said.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for this. This has been super insightful, getting to know how editors work. It's kind of amazing that how the editor's job is not just about, a lot of us, a lot of folks out there think of editors as people who just write, people who write at leisure, right? I think the word leisure is definitely missing from a newsroom setup, right? And it's just not so much more about, right? It's just so much more about being agile, about being able to get to the user, connect with the user, right? And I think the editor now is part marketeer, part writer, part an operation champion, right? Who in the middle of action, making split-second calls to say, here is what should go and here is what should not go, right? We all massively underestimate what editors